Amazing. Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. It's absolutely amazing. I always get a little bit nervous when people introduce me as the keynote speaker, because I always think that's for other people who know so much more than I do. So that makes me more nervous than anything else, because yes, I have worked in this line of work for many, many years. And I think I have a lot of experience and knowledge, but I certainly don't consider myself an expert in any way, shape or form. The reason I say that is because I'm not a foster parent, and I'm not a parent and child fostering parent. I am a psychotherapist and have been working supporting fostering families and adoption families for many, many years now. I guess for me, it's really important that I kind of make it clear, one, I'm not an expert. I started my career in adult psychotherapy and worked with many adults over many, many years who had experienced early trauma, who had experienced really neglectful parenting early on, and who had then themselves become parents, who had then themselves moved into adult life and were trying to make sense of it. And I think that's kind of where I'm looking at it from when I think about working with parents and children. Oftentimes when we see parents and children coming into placement, a lot of our attention, a lot of the focus is on the child. And my experience has been that actually we need to be giving the parents just as much attention, just as much support, simply because majority of them, and I know I'm generalizing, but majority of them have had very adverse childhoods of their own, and they've grown up into adults who are doing the very best that they can with what they know. And our role as their support network around them is to be able to support these parents. So I think the reason I look at it like that is because for many years prior to working with parents and children, I worked with the adults, and they helped me understand the journey that they had been on and what it was like for them to be parents, not knowing how to be a good enough parent. So a lot of my work was around parents. I then moved on, and I have specialised in the last 20 years. I've specialised in working with parents and children. All of my work at the moment is only with parents and children. I don't work with individuals by themselves anymore. I work in a dyadic way, because for me it's really beneficial that I can help the parent to be able to help the child, because at the end of the day, a child can come into therapy, a parent can come into therapy. I'm with them maybe once a week, twice a week if I'm really, really lucky. And the rest of the time, the parent is with the child, so they need to be able to help the child, or the parent is in placement where they are getting the support from the network around them. So for me, it's more important to actually upskill the people around this family than it is for this family to be in therapy with me. So I think that's kind of been a lot of my focus for many, many years, which is why I work with so many organisations to help them support the families that they are caring for, rather than having everybody in therapy. I'm going to sort of think about and start thinking about parent and child perspective from a very theoretical perspective. It's going to be a lot of information. I really do appreciate that virtually it's really, really tricky to stay engaged for a long period of time, especially with somebody yabbering on in the background. You are going to have an opportunity to put questions in the chat, so please do feel free to do that. I'm not used to being the person doing all the lecturing. I'm a very interactive trainer, so I do like a lot of interaction. So I would really, really encourage you, please do put as many questions or thoughts or reflections in the chat as you possibly can. And yeah, I'm happy to answer those in the end. So I have allocated us quite a bit of time at the end for reflections and for questions. Okay, so when we're thinking about parent and child placements, I guess when Jill asked me to think about talking to parents about this, I was thinking about how can I support the families who are supporting parent and child in foster care to understand what might be happening for them from a neurological perspective, what might be happening from a biological perspective, and why sometimes it is just so incredibly difficult to support the parent to be able to support the child. We talk about this thing called being defensive and not being open and engaged. And I'm going to have a little bit of a conversation around what that means. We're going to think about what parenting or growing up in an environment where you are not exposed to good enough parenting, what it does to our nervous system, what it does to our brain, and what happens as we then move on as an adult and become parents ourselves. Then we're going to have a little bit of a think about why it's so tricky for so many of these parents to hold a reciprocal relationship with their child, because reciprocity is just so important when we think about parent and child dyads. That's what we rely on, and oftentimes you will find that many of the parents find that incredibly difficult. And it's not. It's so much more. It's so much deeper than just them not wanting to be able to do it. It's a biological drive that prevents them from doing it. So I'm going to think a little bit around that. And then we're going to end up thinking a little bit about what that therapeutic, paceful way of being, why it is so important, how it supports parents. There is so much information around pace, which we'll have a little look at the end. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with the term PACE, which is the playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And it is a therapeutic way of being that is just so incredibly important if we're going to connect with and support the vulnerable families that we are working with. So it's not a PACE training. That's a 3-day training all by itself. So it's just dipping our toes in, as it is with all of this information, the neuroscience around it, understanding the importance of that reciprocal relationship. We're going to be dipping our toes in over the next hour or so. And I would invite anybody and really encourage anybody who has an interest in this, or who does find this has sparked a bit more of an interest, to go out and do a little bit more research, read. There's so many books out there. There's lots of videos which I can point you to. Okay, so let's think a little bit about the parent and child placement. So it's interesting that Jill actually mentioned the research. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen here, and I'm just going to share. Promise you, it is not death by PowerPoint. I'm not a PowerPoint person. I'm just going to have 1 or 2 little slides up so that you can keep it in mind whilst I'm talking some things through, if that's okay. I just want to share. Can you see that, Jill? Yeah, good. Cool. I'll just make it big so that you can see it. Just having a little bit of a go slow. Okay. Interestingly, Jill actually had mentioned the research that was done. Martin and Davies did actually do that research down in West Sussex, and there is very very little research, and I'm not going to go into all that research. It is all available online for anybody who wants to look at it. But what I have taken out from that is the parts that are relevant to what I'm talking about right now, the part that is relevant to the information that I'm going to be sharing. So part of this research, which ran 2005 to 2007, what they discovered was that prior to placement, in all cases, there were concerns about the parents' parenting abilities, and concerns around particularly a low knowledge of childcare, a lack of emotional ability to parent the child, and those were 100% in all the study cases. And for 77%, there was intellectual or learning difficulties. And when we talk about intellectual learning difficulties, we're thinking about neurodiversity, we're thinking about autism, we're thinking about ADHD, we're thinking about developmental delays in learning. So it's a very broad term when we think about intellectual or learning difficulties. When they broke it down even further, the most prominent issues concerning the family and care were child protection issues, so parents being unable to keep their child safe. 84% of the parents' own experience of childhood was impacting their ability to parent their child. 74% had a lack of support networks. 43% had drug and alcohol related issues, and 40% there was mental health issues. So a lot of those intertwined with each other. There were other areas that they were concerned about, but for the purpose of this talk, I just wanted to highlight those ones for a particular reason. So I want you to hold that in mind as you're thinking about that. Oh, gone on to the next one, sorry. Okay, and I'm just going to think a little bit around, I'm just going to get rid of that for a moment, thank you. Oh, do you know what, I don't like virtual stuff, I really like doing stuff in person. Right, I'm going to just leave that there for you, but I just want us to think a little bit about why I'm starting here. The reason I start here is because therapeutic support within a parent and child foster placement, when we typically think about this, we think about how we support the parent within the home to carry out the task of parenting a child, so showing the parent how to do it. And oftentimes at the end, the foster parent is placed in the position where they have to offer some sort of impartial evaluation. What happened? How did it happen? How are they managing? So your information, your response, your opinion is asked for by people who are making a decision as to whether parents are able to return to their own homes and look after their child. And what I'm kind of thinking about, what I have learned during my years of working with families, is we need to be thinking about the long-term impact of supporting this parent. We want to be able to think about how the parent's interaction with their own child impacts the child long-term. And if we're going to be doing this, we need to be thinking about where the parent is in the here and now and really reflect on how we support vulnerable adults. Because when we're working with the parent and child, the parent in the parent and child foster placement, we're working with incredibly vulnerable adults. Why do we think that they're vulnerable? Okay, well, let's look at the concerns that were highlighted in that research. The first one was a low knowledge of childcare. 100% of parents had a low knowledge of childcare. If we break that down and start thinking, how do we learn how to parent our own children? We learn this from our own experience of being parented. And for so many of the children, and I appreciate it's not all, but for so many of the parents in the parent and child foster placement, their own experience of childhood has been really traumatic to a lesser or greater extent. We will always parent the way that we were parented unless we make a conscious decision to parent in a different way. That is true for many of us. And if all of you kind of reflect on your own parenting, how often do we find ourselves saying, gosh, I sound just like my mum, or I sound just like my dad, or I sound just like my nan, or I remember my mum doing this, or my dad doing that, or my nan doing this. We parent in exactly the same way. And for good enough parenting, that's absolutely fine. What we do to it is we kind of add on each time. So our parents may have parented us in a really good way. We then move on, new things happen, new discoveries are made. We add on to that. So we're continuously building on those blocks. For parents who haven't experienced good enough parenting during their childhood, their format, their template for being able to parent is not on a stable foundation. If you've not experienced good enough parent, you have to make a conscious effort to parent in a different way, to find out about parenting in a different way. For many of the parents who come into foster placements, they often lack the capacity, the emotional and cognitive capacity to make this conscious decision, usually because they are really unsupported and alone. Many of them, as we saw, have mental health problems, drug and alcohol dependency, a lack of a support network. That prevents them from making that decision. So oftentimes they will just fall into the pattern of parenting their child in the way that they were parented, which is why they have such a low knowledge of childcare. When we think about the lack of emotional ability to parent, what is emotional ability? So emotional availability, being able to be there for your child, be alongside your child, is the result of experiencing an emotional connection with another yourself. Being able to be vulnerable, experiencing being emotionally held. And again, for many of the parents in the parent and child foster placements, their own childhood experience didn't allow for this emotional connection. They didn't have the emotional connection, they didn't have the emotional regulation. And as a result of that, they themselves become what we describe as emotionally more defensive. We're less open and engaged socially. We're less able, we're less willing to make ourselves vulnerable. we're less willing to connect with another because of the emotional social pain it induces in us. So when a parent has not experienced that themselves as a child, as they become a parent, they are less able to offer that to their own child. Again, their own childhood experience. When we think about lack of support networks, from a biological perspective, we are biologically wired to connect. We're social creatures. We rely on interaction and connection. However, at times of dysregulation, so when we start feeling a little bit more defensive, either through being judged, through fear of failure, through fear of rejection, what we will do as a safety precaution is we will disconnect from our social networks and support. It means we become self-reliant and we're less able or less likely to engage in connection. Now, again, when we think about parents from a parent and child foster home, they usually have very little or no support networks. They may experience support and connection as painful or as critical, and so they work really, really hard to remain self-reliant, which often leaves the parents to feeling emotionally overwhelmed, which again means that they're less able to connect with their child. So their own experience, again, of not having that connection, of having a lack of support networks around them, prevents them from engaging in the support network around them at the moment, prevents them from connecting with their child. The last two things that I want us to just have a quick think about is mental health issues. Parents who are not supported with their own mental health issues often find it really challenging to think about their own needs as well as those of their own children. Mental health issues can mean that a parent is quite literally treading water themselves. They're not able to think about their child who might be in distress. They might not be able to read the cues of parenting. So they don't understand when a child is asking for connection. They don't understand when a child needs them to approach. They don't feel that same rewarding parenting. They aren't able to make sense of the child's internal experience for them because they themselves are treading water. They're trying to keep their own head above water. It inevitably means that they become really defensive. They're less able to engage, emotionally connect with their own child. Drugs and alcohol misuse. For many, and again, I'm generalizing, so it's not the same for everybody, and I really appreciate that it's not the same for everybody, but for drugs and alcohol, it's often used as a scaffolding to support people who are emotionally overwhelmed. When we've got all of these emotions, when we can't make sense of stuff, many people who don't have another way of seeking support will engage in drugs and alcohol. For a number of reasons, parents can find themselves in a place where they feel alone, they can feel judged, they feel inadequate. For some of them, there might be emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. Drugs and alcohol is their scaffolding that they need to protect the most vulnerable parts of themselves. When they are in a drug-induced state or they've been drinking a lot, they're unable to engage their child, that level of alcohol, that level of drug addiction prevents them from being able to hold that emotional connection with their little one. But it is their way of protecting themselves. So when we think about all of these parents, we think about what do we need to do to help them? Because ultimately what we're wanting them to do is to be able to connect with their child. The first video that we saw there, I hadn't seen previously, but the last thing that lovely young mom said is just that, what I'm realizing is that the connection, the attachment to the child and for myself. Attachment and connection is the one thing that we absolutely need. It's the thing that we seek. The sad thing is that for many of the people who come into a parent and child foster placement, they haven't experienced safe connection. So their nervous systems, their brains have wired differently. They have not wired the same as a child who would have grown up in a good enough home. They then become parents and they cannot parent their child in a way that we want them to be able to parent that child. So we're going to go right back to the beginning and think about what inadequate parenting does for a child and what happens to them as they become a parent. Let's have a little think about what happens in the first couple of years of life. I'm going to stop sharing that because I don't think you need to see that. Or I might just leave it there. No, I'll leave it there because I'm going to move on to another slide in a second. Okay, so let's just think a little bit about what happens in the first 3 years of life. As a baby, we are 100% reliant on our parent to keep us safe. We are the only mammal species that is unable to find food for ourselves, that is unable to fight or flight. The only thing that we can actually do is freeze. We can dissociate. We rely 100% on the adults around us to keep us safe. Every single time the baby cries, every single time the baby has a need, we share this need with our parent. We hold the hope that our parent will respond and meet our need. And every time our need is met, every time our parent responds to us, they are emotionally regulating us. They're helping us to feel comforted. They're helping us to feel safe. And in doing so, they are helping us to wire the neural pathway that says connection to us is safe. Connection to another human being is safe. At my time of my most vulnerable time, when I'm frightened, when I'm scared, when I'm frustrated, when I'm angry, when I'm upset, any of those things, connection is the thing that regulates me and keeps me safe. So that's very, very basic. I'm going to just have a little share of a video, of a slide here. I want to just show you here, slide from the current slide. What happens in terms of our neurological, our biological development every single time this happens. This is very, very simplistic. It's very basic, just so that we get an idea of what's happening. So within our brain, we've got what we call the tri-brain. So we've got 3 parts of our brain: the lower part, the middle part, and the top part. The lower part is our reptilian part of our brain that is responsible for the day-to-day functioning of our body. It keeps us alive. It's responsible for keeping our heart beating, our eyelids opening and closing, our blood pressure, all of those things. It keeps us safe. Our fight, flight, freeze, our ability to react and not reflect, is situated in the bottom part of our brain.
Bonita, can I just let you know that the slide hasn't changed?
Oh, has it not changed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back and I'll put it back up. I think it needs to be. Let me find the slide. I think I have to. Because I'm external. Has that changed? Yeah.
It has, yeah.
Cool. Right. Can you still? Oh God.
Yes, it's there.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Okay. Right. So we go back to this lovely brain part. We've got our middle part of our brain called the limbic system, and within the limbic system there are 3 really, really important parts of our brain. One called the amygdala, one called the hippocampus, and one called the hypothalamus. Don't worry about the names. It's just thinking about what they do. So when we think, can you see that? Is that coming up, Jill?
It is, yes.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Right. So hypothalamus, part of our brain that regulates our autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is the nervous system that happens in our body, happens totally outside of our consciousness. We actually cannot control our nervous system. It happens happens automatically, which is why it's autonomic nervous system. That decides whether we go into fight, flight, or freeze, or whether we stay calm. And really importantly, this triggers our stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that we all 100% need. It helps us think a little bit clearer. It gets us out of situations if we're in danger. It's that hormone that is released when you're about to do a presentation to 100 people thinking, I'm not actually sure if I'm going to be giving stuff or telling them stuff that they don't already know. That's the hormone that is released in your body. Okay. The next part, called our amygdala, I call this our fire alarm. Our amygdala is the place in our brain where we actually process all of our emotions. We work out whether we are scary, whether it's a pleasant experience, whether it's an exciting experience, whether it's a boring experience. Our fire alarm, our amygdala, will continuously go off. And depending on how we make sense of a situation, our body will decide whether we need to cry, whether we need to run, whether we need to fight, whether we need to be calm. The final part of this limbic system, which is really, really important, is a thing called the hippocampus. Really, the way that I remember it is from Africa, I always think about all the hippos, and I just imagine the hippos, especially if you think about the movie Madagascar, the hippos laying in their lovely mud pool, having a great time, just laying around there. Every single time something happens, they jump out of their mud pool, they go over to the filing cabinet, and what they will do is they will start logging memories. Your hippocampus is the place where you log your memories. It's also the place that is responsible for turning off the stress hormone cortisol. We know that for children who are exposed to trauma and abuse, the hippocampus, we have two hippocampi, they do not grow or they do not develop as well. The reason for this is because high levels of cortisol prevent the hippocampi from growing. So they stay a bit smaller, which is why it's a little bit more tricky for people who have experienced trauma to hold on to memories. So let's think about what happens in our brain every single time a child needs to have a need met. Simple thing, baby's hungry. As baby gets hungry, your body goes into fight or flight. Oh my gosh, if I don't get fed now, I'm going to die. I desperately need to eat. Your hypothalamus will start triggering your cortisol, and your body is deciding whether it needs to go into fight, flight, or freeze. At the same time, your amygdala, your fire alarm starts going off, and your fire alarm is saying, this is a really scary situation. I don't know when I'm going to get fed again. I really, really don't like this. I don't know what to do. Which is my body, your muscles all tense up. Baby's muscles tense up a lot because they're going, I need to have a need met. Your hippocampus is going, guys, I really don't know what to do here. I'm trying to think about what to do. I don't have any memories of this. I'm looking in my filing cabinet. Nothing's happening yet. Very quickly, a good enough parent will come along, will connect with the baby. So what we usually do in good enough families is we pick the baby up. So from a sensory perspective, we pick them up, we soothe them, we hold them, we bring them close to us, we regulate them. And for anybody who, if you think about it, we go into this, what they call mother ease. So we start talking with really high pitched voice, we start rocking, we tap them, we go shh, 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 shh. What we're doing is we are regulating their emotions. We are regulating their nervous system. In the brain, the hippocampus goes, I can store this memory. When I have a need, when I am hungry, my body is going to release this cortisol. My amygdala is going, this is scary, but I now know that a good enough parent will come along and soothe me. I'm going to log that in the memories box and I can turn off the cortisol. How many times a day does a baby cry because they have a need met? Hundreds and hundreds of times a day. Every time they're cold, every time they have a pain, every time they've got wind, every time they've got a wet nappy, every time they feel a bit lonely, if they hear a sound, if there's loud noise. Every single time that happens, our body will release cortisol, our amygdala goes off, our hippocampus sees, have we done this before? A good enough parent comes along, soothes the baby, holds the baby, regulates the baby, and a memory is stored. And every time the cortisol is turned off, our body releases really nice hormones. We release dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. They're really nice, happy hormones. This means that our body is not flooded with cortisol, so our hippocampus grows really nicely. Our alarm system is not constantly going off because it goes off and it's regulated and it goes off and it's regulated and it goes off and it's regulated. So we have this lovely system going on and off. And our hypothalamus knows when to trigger the release of hormones, and it does cortisol and all the good hormones, cortisol and all the good hormones. So our brain develops in a really, really lovely way. Okay. That's what's happening on the brain side. When we think about what might be happening on the nervous system side, because the two go hand in hand. Has that changed, Jill?
It has,
cool.
Yes.
Cool. So our nervous system, remember I said our autonomic nervous system works outside of our a conscious awareness. Not going to worry about the entire nervous system, but within the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, there are two really significant parts called the sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems. These are regulated by our hypothalamus. Why are they so very, very important? Because when we are calm, when we are relaxing, when we are in a nice, everything's okay state, which is where I hope all of you are, we will be sitting predominantly in our parasympathetic nervous system. When we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, we can rest, we can digest our food, we can relax, but really importantly, we can socially connect and relationally respond to others around us. This is when we have those lovely connected times. That's when you're having coffee with a friend, you're having a chat, when you're having a conversation with a loved one or another family member or a friend. That's where we are when we are engaging in this connected state with our children. Our sympathetic nervous system is where we go to when we move more into our fight, flight, or freeze. So when we feel like, what do I need to do right now? What do I need to do to keep myself safe? And in a healthy nervous system, we're constantly moving between the two. So again, let's go back to the situation of a little one who needs to have their needs met. Baby's crying because they're hungry. As they are crying, they will move into their sympathetic nervous system because they go into fight, flight, or freeze. I'm going to die if I don't get fed. The body has released cortisol because our hypothalamus has gone, this is a scary situation. The cortisol shifts us into our sympathetic nervous system. Our amygdala is screaming, the alarm's going off, this is very, very scary. So it's priming our body to keep ourselves safe. We're moving into our defensive side of our nervous system. Our hippocampus is going, let me see if I can find a memory. A parent comes along, picks the child up and regulates them and soothes them through sensory processing. So we hold the child, we make noises, we sing, we hum, we tap their back, we rock. What we're doing is we're saying, I've got this, we're okay, I'm going to regulate you. Our nervous system becomes regulated, so our hippocampus goes, this is okay, this is safe, we can stop releasing cortisol now. We can start releasing the nice stuff, the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin. We can release that because that's the nice connecting stuff. Our body shifts back into our parasympathetic nervous system. So we now connect. We're now alongside our parent. We can now feed. We can be alongside them. Again, think about how many times a day a baby does this. We shift into our sympathetic. A parent soothes us. We come back into our parasympathetic. We're hungry again, we go into our sympathetic, our parent soothes us, we come back into our parasympathetic. So we're doing this seesaw movement all the day, all day long with the baby and in our nervous system. This leads to the development of a healthy nervous system. It means that our body knows when to release cortisol, we stay in our sympathetic, and we also know how to relax, we know how to connect, we know how to be alongside somebody and be connected to them in our parasympathetic nervous system. When we think about children who grow up in an environment where their needs are not met consistently, predictably, reliably, and sensitively, for the baby cries. The hypothalamus releases cortisol because you're hungry, I need to eat. Our nervous system will shift into the parasympathetic side. We're moving into our fight, flight, freeze. What do I need to do? Our amygdala, the fire alarm system, starts going off and says, you are not safe right now. If you don't eat, you're going to die. I don't know what you're going to do. So our fire alarm keeps going in our head. This is a scary situation. This is anxiety provoking. Our hippocampus starts looking for a memory. If we have a parent who is unable to meet the needs of the child for all sorts of reasons, drugs and alcohol, mental health issues, learning difficulties, neurodiversity, domestic abuse, all sorts of reasons, all sorts of things that get in the way of a parent being able to meet the need of their child. Your hippocampus is unable to store a positive memory. What they learn to store is, when you were hungry, this is how you felt, you didn't get fed. This means that our nervous system stays in our sympathetic nervous system. We remain hypervigilant, we remain alert. We don't go into our parasympathetic. We don't have that nice backwards and forwards between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Our body is releasing lots of cortisol. That means that our brain, the fire alarm, our amygdala, becomes bigger because we're primed looking for danger. And our hippocampi, both of them don't grow as big because cortisol prevents them from growing as big. So we don't store as many memories. We store as many memories as are necessary to keep us safe. After a time when your needs are not met, what babies learn to do is stop crying and stop asking for their needs to be met. And that's when they move right down in their parasympathetic nervous system to their shutdown phase. That is, if you think about the most extreme phase, that is where we learn to play dead. We don't ask for our needs to be met. So it's different from the freeze in fight, flight and freeze. It's our shutdown state. This is what we see with young children who come into care or who are adopted, who don't ask for their needs to be met. When we hear parents saying, gosh, they've moved into my home, it's amazing, it's beautiful and wonderful, they slept for 12 hours solid. That's when red flags start going, because as babies learned to move into a shutdown phase. What it means for us from a connection perspective, because connection happens in your parasympathetic nervous system. And in order to be there, we need to feel relaxed. We need to feel calmer. If our brain, our fire alarm is always going off and telling us that our needs are not going to be met, or that when we connect with another, it is scary. So think about parents who respond really adversely to their child. They shout at their child. They're physically abusive to their child. They look at their child with a blank expression because that's as painful for a baby as physical pain. Who look at the baby with anger. When that happens, our brain registers that as scary. Scary means we stay on the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic means our body's got cortisol, which means that what we are learning at a very, very young age is connection is scary. Connection is not a safe thing. What then happens as we get older, if we think about as the parent then gets older, they go through childhood, or the baby goes through childhood. The baby goes through and learns that it's not safe to be vulnerable. My needs might not be met. Your brain is wired to think, I need to look after myself. Your brain is wired to say, I need to do this by myself. I can't rely on anybody else. I rely on me. Because my amygdala is continuously going, saying, when you need something, if you ask for connection, if you ask for regulation, you're going to be met with something that is not nice and unpleasant. We don't like that, so we'll avoid it. In doing so, we stay more in our sympathetic nervous system. We don't often go into our parasympathetic nervous system. And connection happens in your parasympathetic nervous system. The reason I share this is to think about what happens with that child as they then get older. What do they learn to do? So I'm just going to switch over here. Hopefully that's changed to another slide that talks about a thing called blocked trust. When we talk about children who have experienced that level of adversity, and it happens in the first 3 years of life. So oftentimes we will find babies who are exposed to an environment like that for the first 8 months of their lives. This is where they remain. Our attachment styles can change. We know our internal working model, our attachment styles, all of these things, we know that we can change because our brain is such a malleable, wonderful piece of kit that we can change, we can develop, and we can grow. Our nervous system is slightly different. Our nervous system is not that easily changed. What we have to learn to do is regulate our nervous system, because our nervous system happens outside of our conscious awareness. So let's just have a look at this little thing, what block trust actually means. If we're in a caregiving environment that is not nurturing, where distress is met with pain and fear and or silence, that leaves the child with an inner life that says this is terrifying and this is full of shame. So we talk about how shame impacts that child. When we talk about distress being met with pain, we're not talking solely about physical pain. We're talking about emotional pain, because the part of our brain that differentiate or that understands pain does not differentiate between physical pain and emotional pain. Part of our brain that differentiates or that understands pain is the same part. So when a baby is met with a facial expression that is blank, or if we're met with an angry expression, we will experience that as pain. If you think about it, if you walk around a shopping centre, or just walk around shops, walk around Sainsbury's, and we often see little ones in their pushchairs, or we see them in trolleys, and they've got these huge big eyes and they're looking at us. We are wired to respond to them with a happy face. We become really animated. We do all these weird things. When children look at us, we sit there going, oh, hello, how are you? We can't help doing it because we're wired to do it. If we responded to that child with a blank face, the child would automatically turn away, because that level of pain is too much for them. So when they're experiencing that day after day, think about parents who suffer from a postnatal depression, parents who suffer from long-term depression, schizophrenia, parents who bipolar, parents who drug and alcohol dependent, parents who are in a domestic violence situation, parents who have not had the experience of a nurturing parent themselves. When their baby is distressed, oftentimes they will meet the child's need in a way that is painful for that child. When that happens, our body releases cortisol, and our cortisol triggers our fire alarm, and our fire alarm triggers our stress response system. So we move into that sympathetic side of our nervous system. We remain on high alert. Where that pushes us is into our defense system. So we talk about our defense system, we talk about the tiger, the opossum, and the chameleon. So it's our more defensive strategies. Do we come out fighting? Do we become really, really withdrawn? Or are we the chameleon that goes in and out? So very closely related to our different attachment styles. We become chronically hypervigilant. And what is really, really important is our curiosity and new learning is suppressed. We do not want to try out new things, which makes it really difficult to relearn a way of being in a relationship. Because what our defense system tells us is, this is the part that is safe. Let's not do anything different. This has kept you alive for all of these years. Let's just stay here. Our social switching system, so if you think about that nervous system, and I was talking about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, we need to move between the two, because our social engagement is on the other side. It's on our parasympathetic side. When we've got children who have experienced adverse early lives, we suppress our social engagement system, which means that we don't experience comfort or joy in a relationship. Connection is not comforting for us. We do not want to do it. We do anything not to connect. We avoid connection. And we see this in children very, very young. We can see it from weeks old, where a baby will avoid connection with their parent if they find it painful. What we also do is we inhibit our social pain system. When we talk about social pain system, we talk about if somebody rejects you, if somebody ignores you, if somebody is critical of you, that's a social pain. That's an emotional pain that we feel. And what we do is we try and avoid that. But what for many of the young people is they will totally inhibit that, which is why when they are feeling rejected, rather than seeking comfort at that time, rather than going, I don't know what to do about this, somebody help me, they move straight into their defense system, which is why we see the behaviors coming out. So this block trust has a lifelong impact on us. It doesn't change. It's something that we can learn to regulate. We can't just fix it. We can't take a tablet for it. We can't do lots of therapy for it. It happens outside of our conscious awareness. So what we have to learn to do is regulate it. We have to learn to go, this is happening. What can I do? I need to override my need to go into defense system. How can I move myself into a place where actually I can go, I want to engage. I want to be alongside somebody. But you have to consciously be aware of it and want to do that in order to change it, because it happens outside of our conscious awareness. Let's just think about what might happen then with parents who have then grown up, or children, I should say, who have grown up into these parents. Part of parenting is thinking about a reciprocal relationship. So we've had a child who's not experienced the good enough parenting, who then experiences what we refer to as block trust, who is very defensive, who doesn't know how to become more open and engaged, doesn't know how to be more social. They then have a child. And this child, when they are born, wants to engage in a reciprocal relationship. Now, for a good enough parent, for somebody who's had a good enough life, who's gone through life with having supportive family, who hasn't had early adversity, when their child cries, they will approach them. They will feel reward with their child. They'll be able to start reading their child. They'll be able to make meaning from what the child is doing. They will be able to use what we call our executive functioning system. That's the part that sits in the top level of our brain, and it governs what we do. It's our decision making. It's our planning, our organizing. It's our ability to know what needs to happen now, what needs to happen next. This executive functioning system is like the computer of our brain. It governs what we do. If a child is engaging in a reciprocal relationship with us, all of this works really, really nicely. If we've got a lack of reciprocity, so that can be because of the characteristics of the child or of the parent. So when we think about these parents who have had early life experiences, who have grown up to be parents, oftentimes they don't know how to do that reciprocal relationship. So when their child expresses a need, their early life experiences can trigger a really adverse response in that parent. So, for example, if we had a parent who had learned as a child, you do not cry, you don't show any form of need, because if you do that, there's going to be an adverse response. You then grow up to be a parent, your baby cries. Without realizing it, that unconscious trigger starts coming up. Your nervous system then says, hang on a second, crying's really, really scary here. You know what happens when somebody cries? It shifts you straight back into your sympathetic nervous system. So what you as a parent then do is you go, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And you reject the child. You want to move away from the child, which means there can't be a reciprocal relationship. It's not that the parent doesn't want to do it. The parent's nervous system is overriding their ability to do it. If we have a parent who has a really good executive functioning system, so your executive functioning system is really well developed, that's when we find parenting is a job and there's no pleasure. We often see this with parents who are parenting children not born to them. So foster parents, adoptive parents, kinship care parents. When you are parenting a child, you've got the executive functioning system, which means you can do it, but for lots and lots of reasons, which we talk about different levels of blocked care. Blocked care is a continuum, so we dip in and out of it all the time, but there might be something going on in life. There might be an illness in the family. There might be a characteristic in the child that really triggers you. It might be a stage that the child's going through that really triggers you. We become less able to respond to the child, but we are able to meet their needs because our executive functioning system keeps all of it intact and says this is what you need to do. If you have parents whose executive functioning system is compromised, and this can be compromised because of learning difficulties, mental health, drugs and alcohol, neurodiversity, that's when there's more chance of a parent being abusive or neglectful towards that child. And oftentimes, that's when those are the parents that we are working with. Blocked care, or the parenting role, is impacted by the child's experience of, or the parent's experience of being a child when they were younger. Many of the parents that you are supporting, many of the parents who are in parent and child foster placements have had an adverse childhood experience, which means that their brain has developed differently, their fire alarm is going off, their hippocampus hasn't stored all the right memories, their nervous system is primed in the defensive mode. They're not open and engaged, they're really defensive. They then come into parenting and the child reaches out and says, hey, I want to connect. And for many of them, that connection is really, really scary. And it happens at a biological level. It happens unconsciously. The parent doesn't go, I don't want to do this. The parent's unconscious or autonomic nervous system takes over, which prevents the parent from wanting to engage, which is why they reject the child, which is why they can't care for the child's needs. This reciprocal relationship is really, really important. The baby needs it. The parent finds it really painful. The parent will then move into a place of defense, and the baby then learns that connection is scary. And so the cycle starts all over again. When we think about a relationship where there is no reciprocity and the child doesn't consistently respond to the efforts of the caregiving, parents can start to feel ineffective and they can experience a sense of failure. So when the parent moves into a parent and child foster placement and we start supporting them and saying, hey, this is what we need to keep doing. This is how we need to keep doing it. Let's go, baby's crying, let's go and feed them. They might need a cuddle. The baby may have had an experience already for a number of weeks where the parent was unable to respond to them. This means that the baby will, at an unconscious level, be less responsive to their parent in the here and now. The parent will feel this as rejection, especially if they've had their own early life experience of trauma. That to them, rejection is painful to us. We do not like rejection. We don't like abandonment. Any human being will respond in a defensive way. When we feel rejected, our body, our nervous system takes over and says, we don't like this, don't want to do this, protect yourself. And in protecting ourselves, we become more defensive, which is why we feel ineffective and a sense of failure. And the parents oftentimes seems as though they can give up so much quicker than any other parent. The rejection from their child activates the defensive system, and their caregiving begins to shut down. Okay. I'm not going to worry about that because that's nothing to. This is just thinking about our nervous system. Again, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. Just thinking about, if you're interested in this type of thing, thinking about what happens in our nervous system. We have a really primitive nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze, which is what many children who have grown up in traumatic environments live in. And we have a more evolved vagal nervous system, which is where we blend our primitive, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. And that's what we're hoping that we can achieve. Okay, but you can read up a lot more about that if anybody is interested. So I'm going to stop sharing that now, if that's okay. So let's think about, we've got parents now who are more defensive, parents who find it really, really tricky to engage in a relationship, who then move into a fostering home, fostering placement, a parent-to-child fostering placement, and we're saying, hey, we want to support you. Because the parent is predominantly in their sympathetic nervous system, they're going to be feeling really, really defensive. They're going to be more guarded. They're going to want to protect themselves from rejection. They'll find it really difficult to experience real pleasure in parenting. And what we might notice is that these parents can become more reactive than they can be proactive, because they are in their defensive system. They're not in their actual social engagement system. They are primed looking for signs of rejection, which means that they can become really irritable, and they can be very, very cynical about their situation. On top of this, when we are trying to help them, when we are trying to support them, when we're trying to offer them some sort of advice and support, they can see that as being rejecting. They interpret that as us telling them they are not doing a good enough job, they are failing, they need support with something. We look at it as us saying, guys, we know what you need here, let me give you some scaffolding. The way that you've experienced that when you are more in your defensive system is you are criticizing me. So we start feeling more guilty, we experience higher levels of shame, which means that we move into a more shut down position, which means that we do not want the support offered to us, which is why many of the parents will actually reject the support that is offered to them long before we get them to a place where they can actually engage with it. Most of the parents who come into parent-to-child foster placement have really, really fragile nervous systems. They've experienced trauma in their early life, whatever that might look like. Think about families who move around a lot. Think about growing up with a parent who has a mental health problem, a parent who has alcohol and drug addiction, a domestic violence place, homelessness, financial issues. Any of those things that come up means that a child is less likely to have had a typical parenting upbringing, which means that their nervous system might have developed differently, which means that their nervous systems are very, very fragile. And if we're going to be thinking about supporting the parent and child foster placement, we need to be thinking about supporting the parent to be able to engage in some sort of connection where they don't feel frightened and scared, because if we can help them experience that, they will be able to experience that with their child, which is why we think a lot about maintaining an attitude of pace. Our paceful way of being is a term that was coined by an American psychologist called Dan Hughes. Dan Hughes has worked for many, many years with adoptive and foster families in America, where he developed a type of therapy called dyadic developmental psychotherapy. And basically what he realized is that for many years he was working with the child, and he then thought, why is there not a difference? Why are things not changing? I'm working so much with a child, but nothing's changing. And he started doing a lot of research and came to understand that if we're going to help a child recover from trauma, we need to be able to support the adult in that relationship so that they can make sense of what is happening, so they can be aware of their own triggers, so they can be aware of their own internal experience, so they can understand the child, so they can hold compassion for that child. And so he coined that phrase pace. So he talks about playfulness, he talks about acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. Okay, let me share here again with you. Make sure it changes for you. Can you see that there, Jill? Yeah, fantastic, thank you. Okay, so I've gone back to that one now. I was changing. Okay, our paceful way of being. Pace is not something that we do. Pace is a way of being. It's something that we are. There's lots and lots of literature out there around pace, and there's certainly specialist training around pace and thinking about what that paceful way of being is. And pace, because it's not something that we do, we don't start in a particular place. It's kind of a circular thing that just goes around. When we talk about pace and the playfulness, we think about how can we help another experience joy in a relationship. Playfulness is not just about playing games. It's not just about having fun with somebody. It's about how can I help somebody experience that joy in a relationship. So if you think back to that diagram I showed you in the beginning, we talked about block trust. For children who've experienced early adverse experiences, they inhibit their social engagement. So they don't want to experience joy in the relationship. How can we help parents to experience joy in a relationship? Sitting down and having a cup of coffee with them. Just spending time getting to know them, wanting to understand about them, wanting to know about their internal world. Reflect on what makes you feel really special when you are spending time with a loved one and they're wanting to know about you. How do we hold acceptance without evaluating? How can we hold acceptance for somebody's internal experience? We're not holding acceptance for the way that they are behaving. We're not holding acceptance for the way that they have behaved in the past. We're holding acceptance for their internal experience. How can we hold acceptance for the parents around, for you, this is a really, really tough time. And actually your baby crying makes you feel really, really frightened. Your baby crying makes you feel really, really angry. Your baby not eating their food makes you feel really, really inadequate. Your baby not sleeping through at night makes you feel angry because you're tired. How do we hold acceptance for the narrative that they are holding? How do we help them make sense of it without judging it? And then hold the hope that they will change their behaviours. We do this through curiosity. Let's understand what might be happening. Let's be curious and reflective. Let's hold a real stance of not knowing. I want to understand your experience. What's it like for you when your little one cries? What emotion does that bring up for you? How can I connect with the most vulnerable part of you and not judge, not evaluate? And really importantly, how do I hold empathy? How do I have this really deep understanding of the parent and the child's experience? And when we talk about holding huge amounts of compassion for these parents, we're saying, how can I hold empathy and then hold acceptance for where they are? We want to show them how to parent in a really good way. We can do this by modeling what we want them to be able to do. We model that with the parent, not only with the child. How can I hold this paceful way of being with you as the parent? How can I be curious about your experience, not about what you did, why you did it, or how you did it, but be curious about what is that like for you? What did that mean for you? Let's understand, where can my empathy come in, that it must have been so incredibly difficult growing up in an environment where you have no support. I can't imagine what that was like. Help me understand. If we can hold that acceptance and that empathy, we're holding real compassion for these families. And if we are holding compassion for the parents, we are modeling what it is like. We are giving them an experience of connection, the thing that is so frightening for them. For some parents, they'll only be able to manage it in really small doses, because to them, connection is frightening. If we go right back to that very first diagram that I showed you, connection is really scary. So for you as a foster parent coming in and saying, hey, I want to connect with you, for many of these parents, it will automatically release cortisol, which will take them in the defensive nervous system, the sympathetic side. And so they do things, they say things, they react than rather reflect. How do we, as the supporting professionals around these families, be able to say, how can I hold acceptance for what this must be like for you? Where's my empathy? Where's my curiosity? Can I model this? Because that's what I want you to have with your child. If you can experience this, there is a better chance of you being able to offer it to your little one. And ultimately, that's what we want them to be able to do. When the parents experience nurture with acceptance and empathy and curiosity about their internal experience, they have the chance to heal. And that, in the end, will give them an opportunity to change the course of their parenting journey. Holding on to an attitude of pace is ultimately where we all want to be. It's incredibly difficult. It's not something that any of us are going to be able to do. Dan Hughes himself will often say that he's not been able to do it all of the time. You do it some of the time. We're human. Our greatest strength is being humans because we can connect. We're biologically wired to connect and to nurture and to sit alongside one another. Our greatest flaw is that we are human, in that we can become hurt. We can feel and experience feelings of rejection. We can feel and experience feelings of abandonment. That rejection move us more into our defensive side, and then we can't hold on to our attitude of pace. When we think about being paceful, we think about holding that attitude of pace, we need to be in our social engagement side. We can't be in our sympathetic defensive side. So for most of the parents that you are supporting, helping them to feel regulated, to feel connected, to be able to experience joy in a relationship, to be able to think about being alongside and allowing vulnerability to be on display for you to connect with them. That way of being will help them move more into their parasympathetic nervous system, which means that they will be able to do that for their children. We talk about supporting the child. We need to think continuously about how do we support the parent and offer the parent the same therapeutic relationship as we want to offer their child. Okay, I think I'm just about on time there, Jill.
That's great, Bonita. Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
So much to take in.
Let's see. It is a lot. It is a huge amount. It's a massive amount to take in. So let's see. I don't know if there are any